Don't jinx it, but yay.
So, Charlie.
Yeah, well, it's been these last few finance committee meetings. We so much talk about finances every week. But I'm excited about where we're at with the budget. I think as everybody's known, this inflationary 2.9% target. I think we have an excellent chance of getting there. At the same time, making some pretty critical investments in Parks and Recreation, our staff, our public safety units, some needed capital investment, although a lot more to go on the capital investment side of things, I know. I'm looking forward and a little nervous as well to Sarah's work and the team's work on the sort of full breadth of depreciating assets and capital pieces. I know some pieces we're going to be coming out sooner, whether the track and Tanker 4, I think, is going to come to prioritization. But then, we have additional pieces. I think the May meeting, we're trying to get the inventory of all land that the city owns. Steve, I think it was a request from you. We'll talk about that parcel, what was there, but, I think we'll also have some base conditions based on Larry's assessments of those parcels as well to really get an inventory. This is what's city-owned outright. This is what's tax acquired. These are the timelines for it. Probably an initial start conversation on here's what we could or couldn't do. Here's the general frameworks. I think it's probably going to take a couple meetings to get that one. Like, this is the plan, what we do with all of the city-owned land pieces. Steve, I loved your idea on potentially any savings or raise or that could go back into helping our depreciating assets that the city owns. That seems to me to be the most appropriate use of those funds. Or we could just give it all to the city manager and a new salary. It's a bonus.
And the city clerk, right?
And the city clerk, yes, of course. We'll do the city clerk as well. Well, the people in this room, we'll just, they were kind enough to come to finance committee about it. I think, Steve, that's
all a joke.
that's 100% a joke.
Not there.
No, I do joke sometimes that one of my roles here is to make as many people in Ellsworth that are not city employees, as financially well off as possible, whether that's through easier places that have living, for easier business opportunities. That kind of growth in the city is extremely helpful. But on the flip side of that, nobody in government gets to get anywhere near it. I know we did just have, speaking of that, Sue send out a recent request for anybody that receives over $1,000 from somebody that does business with the city, that you are required to disclose that. That's an annual piece in April. So I believe, Sue, is that going to council and staff, or is it just going to staff?
Yeah, it went to everybody, yeah.
And that's if you didn't make any money, then you just say zero, right?
Right, yeah.
Oh,
I think you just don't
You don't report.
you don't report. I mean, yeah, you don't report.
I think I want an affirmative no. I've been thinking about that.
Then if you could resend it, because I'm pretty sure I went not related to me and deleted.
And then a check just said that, hey, this person has received it, and they've
Yeah.
said affirmatively that they do not receive any. Not that I have no evidence or
Yeah.
that any of that has gone on in Ellsworth or will, but I also like to avoid the I didn't get that email
Yeah, it's a good point.
conversation.
And it's a statute requirement,
Yeah.
correct? Yeah.
Yeah, so,
I'll resend it.
yeah. As folks know, I'm a big believer in transparency, and I think pretty much my entire life, my salary through my work in campaigns and in government has been public. All the emails that I make are public. So I think the public trust, especially when it comes to finances, is extremely important. So, yes, from jokes earlier on today about land sales going to people. So I think, as we mentioned last time, we'll have one more budget meeting kind of prior to the next one. It seems like we've got some solid waste to do a little bit and how that could affect maybe some of the revenues. And then we'll talk the vehicle, I think it's not the hugest line item in the budget, but an important one, and I know one that there's been a lot of community comment about too. So I want to make sure that everybody has the information they need to make an informed decision there. That's pretty much it for me right now. I know the audit, we had a conversation on that last night. I won't take too much of Nate and Ashley's updates here, but I'll send it over to them.
No, I was actually going to, I know it was brought up last night, and I feel like, on record, I just want to stress the importance of it so that we feel of getting that audit done. I know everyone's looking forward to it. I can't stress how much I'm ready for it to be done as well. So that's why I have meetings actually with Casella on Monday, RHR ongoing, trying to get this done. Like I said, I kind of agree with Steve, and I know that they said April 30th. I'm not gonna hold my breath, but I'm gonna do everything in our power to get them everything they need, so hopefully they can finish on April 30th. But like I said, that is the most important thing to us right now, especially now that the budget book is kind of dwindling down a little bit. We cannot stress our importance and our desire to get that thing done. So just wanted to make that on record, that that's our goal. That's where we're at.
I just want to mimic Nate.
I have a comment concerning that, if I may. First of all, this has been the best budget information in the 4 years that I've been here. With you folks doing what you've done and Charlie doing what you've done, it's been the best information that I have seen in my 4 years here. Having said that, I've said this before, and I'll say it again, that I think that it could be a lot easier process if, to Charlie's point about the consumer price index, if the operation budgets by department goes through the city managers, and it's within the consumer price index, or you can get it within the consumer price index, that process could be done before it comes to budget. And you could say, you know, the department head couldn't get it there, but I've got it there, which is pretty much what goes on now. However, it could be a little cleaner and a little less time spent on the ones that are in compliance as opposed to the ones that aren't in compliance. Now, maybe that's impossible, but maybe it's not. And again, the information is fabulous, and the flow chart, everything is just fabulous compared to what we've had. But I really believe that if every department head comes in with a budget within the consumer price index, an operation budget, I'm not talking about the capital, I'm talking about the operational budget, then I think there's less in the weeds that we need to be in. But maybe there's more weeds we need to see. But if it's within that scope, to your point, don't tell anybody I'm in agreement with you, okay, please.
Kind of everybody
It's
knows.
recorded, Steve.
It's all right. You're agreeing with me
No,
on-
if we could, I think it could be streamlined better, especially now that you have good information. And secondly, I think everybody's frustrated with the auditing firm. And I could tell you, on the private side, my business has had the same CPA firm since 1969, when my dad started. And the last 5 years, it has been a real push to get the taxes done on time. They always want to file an extension, and it aggravates me to no end. But I think some of what we're experiencing is an industry problem, not a firm problem. Just a thought.
Yeah, a few things, Steve. Maybe talk about your second ones first. Yeah, that on-timeness, we have one more year left with this. I really want to, just kind of like solid waste, thinking towards Casella, that negotiation, like we can start that work now on, is it Ashley and I and Nate have actually already had those conversations. Is there not a state firm that we could use that's maybe bigger and can get into compliance with us? Is there, on the flip side of that, is there like a very local accountant that we can really know our books, be a good independent sort of on the team, I should say monitoring the team, but also locally available, not this sort of current relationship where they manage hundreds and hundreds of clients across Maine and Vermont and et cetera, and we get them one day when they come in every 6 months as more of a, hey, here's the things you need, and they're like, I don't like this, I think this should have been changed. I know the previous audit reports that I've looked into are not nearly as robust, especially on those prior years, that could give me the roadmap to here's what was wrong here, here's what was wrong here. I feel like we can get a lot of better service out of our audit. that we'll definitely look forward to. On the tax bills going out too, that's a smart goal for one of our employees. I know that looks like we're going towards the performance-based system, so if that's missed, that will obviously impact that piece again. That smart goal for that, actually, it's in there's for me as well, and for our team. It's built in there. As long as we have the budget passed and we get the information we need by certain specific periods of times, it's all laid out on when that tax commit will happen this year. I think we're going to meet that deadline. We'll be more than a month earlier than last year. We'll have all the data and information we need. So, and if that doesn't happen, we have this year. He probably won't know that from my performance review in May, but next year I'll have a May review, and I think that should definitely be held account. You told us, Charlie, that we would get the tax bills out on time this year, so I hope to solve that piece. The other side, Steve, I really love these ideas on just process and doing things differently. I concur. We've done a lot better. I'm really happy with kind of where things are at, but we have been really in the weeds. And it's been a lot of times. And then some of the bigger stuff, right? To your point, all right, what's maintenance 2.9%? Get you those budgets much earlier that are kind of cleaned up from our end. We did fast track this budget a little bit. We had a whole flyer on what the process was going to be, and then we said we want to do it earlier for very good reasons. But next year, let's start in November. I've talked to a city manager or town manager, and they have it baked into their charter, the deadlines. This is when the budget process starts. This is when it's due to the council. This is when it blankety blank.
It's in our charter too.
Yeah, we do.
For the deadlines for, what's the date for initiating the budget? I didn't see that.
March something, maybe
Yeah.
it has to be, yeah.
Okay, I'll check that out.
I don't remember the exact dates, I just know it's in there, I read it.
I think it's posted on the website. I think that the whole budget process is on the website.
When it's supposed to start and the whole, the
That's
calendar
part
of
of the charter?
deadlines? Huh. I thought
I don't know,
Yeah, there's a roadmap.
yeah, that, I think.
But
that
there's
was that
something
we made up.
defined in the
Right.
charter, yeah.
I will review this.
I didn't know that either, Charlie, but it's feeling better.
Good to know. The way this person was talking about it, it kind of starts off this is when the departments will submit it to the city manager. That's all in there, in the charter.
I guess my thoughts are this. I think each department has spent a lot of time on budgets, and maybe there's a better, if their budget's within the CPI, there's better use of their time. If they can't get it within the CPI and the city manager can't get it within the CPI, then there needs to be a weed dive. But if every department head can come with, outside of capital, can come with an operating budget, I think that's.
Because then
reasonable.
you'll have the book if you want to look through it all and dig into something but at the same time, we're not going to require that department or we're not going to go
I think there could
line
be
by
less
line.
time spent on the department head if they're within their budget and CPI, I mean.
There's no big requests.
Well,
Great.
right, and then, the capital or outside of the CPI, additional employees. But I think, as a department head, if you're within your CPI operationally, then I applaud that. And there's less time that everyone has to.
And I'm doing that work. I've read this
Right.
budget 4 times, so we can come here and spend a lot more time on here are the 25 items that are beyond CPI, or of course, that need to be discussed. And that's where the
Yeah.
conversation is for the budget and the time spent as opposed to so-and-so, line.
So I'm going to counter that a little bit. This is my second budget. The first one, as we know, was very different from this one. And I think my job is more than what you're describing as kind of rubber stamping. If you get this total dollar, I don't care about the details. I want to understand it. I want to understand what the pieces are, how they come together, what the thinking was. I think, and we had talked about this earlier, process improvement can be put the big items earlier in the agenda. We talked about whether it's that we've got more energy or more curiosity, but if you want to prioritize where we focus. But I think still having that time to go through, we heard Tabby, this is her first budget, and she's got basic questions on what is that. That's part of our job, is to be able to understand it and then endorse it and then defend it. And I can't do that if I've just said, your only goal is you've got to meet the inflation rate, and what's below that in the details isn't my job. So I think, depending on the continuity of the council, and that's, new every year, but setting that expectation of, here are the big tickets that we need to set aside. And I think, to Steve's point, maybe we don't need folks in the audience every night for 3 hours while we're working through this. We bring the questions, but there's a transparency to having the conversations in the open. So I'm not ready to say, if you meet that target, I don't care what the details are.
I think the details need to be available to us, that we can research that, but banging heads over a half an employee, if they're within their
I disagree.
budget, well, we can do that.
It's interesting.
That's
I
okay.
bang heads with, yeah, that's,
I'll fist bump your head.
We recently had an adaptive leadership meeting yesterday. I find it, it's perspective, right? And how do you align on perspective and preference? Some people think 2 hours is too long for that leadership meeting that we have, and you can't have a leadership meeting. Some people are riveted for it and are really getting a lot of value. Some people would prefer like small groups. Some people would prefer. So I've often find it one of the interesting things about this job is trying to read the tea leaves and the collective will of the council, even though it's like, this is.
And it's going to change every year.
Changes
For
every
you,
year, and
so.
in my ideal world, like the budget is so readable and explainable and like accessible, and we've made great progress there. That compared, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
you can open it, you see the cover memo, you go, you have this is the new request, this is this. Maybe there could be a little more background on like kind
We
of
have
how it's
actual from
structured.
past
Pages.
years.
The book has pages, there's table of contents, you can go through each one. To your point, Steve, like ideally you'd be able to kind of go through it the way and to be like, all right, anybody with a 6th grade education can generally understand. Sure, there's going to be some jargon in there and the lines, but you understand, okay, that's the increase from last year to this year, and we've done a lot of work to make that. So is it going to be, to your point, Nancy, is there a way to kind of get that? And then you have the pullouts, but then you also have the information well ahead of time, so you can go, you can still have each
And that's,
department.
I did the number of hours I spent before each meeting to prepare and have my questions ready. And again, it's not challenging what's been happening, it's I need to understand it. So some of it's jargon, and then some of it is just pondering it, so.
Yeah, and I think that's another bit process change. I know I kind of want to do a postmortem, we talked about that more broadly, but me kind of setting my expectations from the council and vice versa, like their expectations maybe from me for what they want to. I think some folks were like you, Nancy. We were getting those emails after the meetings. You read it beforehand. The change, like I didn't see this in the change log.
Yeah, that was me.
And I love that. And some folks, I think, felt like they didn't necessarily have enough time beforehand to read to kind of, and that we could have spent more time on the bigger items. So, we're never going to get to a perfect alignment on expectations for process.
But I think that setting the priorities on, here's where you anticipate some conversation needs to happen.
Yeah.
That's helpful. But it's still, if there's a $1,000 item I don't understand, I want to understand it. Anyways, I had the same history when I was in the legislature of really questioning small numbers to understand it, and had somebody say, $1 million here, $1 million there, eventually it adds up. And it's like, that was not my perspective coming into it. So I want to understand what's happening. And
Yeah, and I think I talked before about like almost like we could talk about the bigger things maybe in each budget, and then be
Yeah.
like, hey, I really want to talk more about this. How does council kind of, as we go through it.
It's true, you could ask, like, are there any questions on this section rather than a line by line? And the questions can be to you, and the person who's responsible for it can get back to us, so that they're not spending 3 hours waiting and then we don't get to
And
the
then
item.
we come back to how do they,
Yeah, I think
That's
you're
perfectly
both
fine.
right, like I think I agree with Steve in that, I think there's, kind of, hey, this was, aligning council and city manager's goals. Hey, the council this year is hoping we want to see, budget stay, consistent with CPI. I just use that for an example. That doesn't have to be that every year, but, and so they understand that, and then, so we get it back, and it's like, okay, here's the understanding, and so, here's the departments that are looking for more, let's dive into that
Right.
more, or the big ticket items. But also to Nancy's point, right, like, that going through the budget process is partly for the council to we need to understand it before we vote on it.
Yeah.
And also for the public. So there's a
It's
balance.
a really good point
Yeah.
about people who are, I have heard from people, your questions have been really helpful because I didn't understand that
Yeah,
either.
yeah, so I think there's a
So,
balance. I think we
yeah.
can definitely do things more efficiently, to Steve's point, but
Mm-hmm.
also the process is the process, and it's important. So I just think it's been a huge, I think we all agree, it's been a huge
Oh, it's been-
improvement.
I can't imagine you doing 3 of the ones we had before.
Yeah.
this, 'cause one was enough.
If I could respond a little bit, I'm talking, I want to clearly state that I'm not talking about just the council and the finance department and the management. I'm talking about within those departments, how much time are the department heads spending on that budget? Moving and twisting. And at some point, there's better resources or better use of their time if they're within check. Maybe we don't agree with this over here and that over here, but in the macro view, if they're in check, at some point, we've got to trust management, being the department head and the city manager. And certainly, I'm not against an open book, but I just wonder how many city hours are being paid for pounding these budgets.
Yeah, I'll maybe let Ashley and Nate jump in because I'm curious for them. It's a mix, you know. There's some department heads that have fairly easy budgets. They were there. They, you know, I asked for consider a 10% cut exercise, and no FTEs, and they hit it out of the park. And some, you know, to be frank, missed the mark. And that's not just due to them. I could have been given better, clearer priorities. We pushed things up, and we had to come. And then some people like Mike had to consolidate 4 budgets in public works that hadn't really been deeply dived into in a very long time, and there was an insane amount of work that he back and forth with the finance department. And I think kind of to the public aspect too, there is a benefit to the being with the weeds, but I also feel like the jargon and the detail like probably makes that like, I as a public member, if I was just looking at a council meeting, like there's no way I would watch that in Castine because of the level of detail. But if it was much more like tailored and these are the big ones and this is what's going to be, like, you know, maybe that's not the right focus, is to engage the TV audience so it's understandable where we're at and exciting, to your point, Patrick. Like that's the process. You have to get in the weeds. That's your business as a council. But I felt it's also interesting from a structural level, like the process, like what is the process? I know in other cities and towns they have different types of processes. I've been talking to Sue about how they organize their councils to have like kind of specific oversight capabilities over 4 broad areas. And, you know, most of the in the weeds on those areas are filtered out before it gets to a council meeting, so that, you know, if a memo is going to come forward, you know, it's something I've been struggling with too, that it's going to have really been, like, that's where the interaction goes. Maybe we could process change here. It's also, I think, interesting from a municipal side. I've built budgets and campaigns and state government, but there's this, like, interesting, council has legislative and executive functions, but then there's sort of a birthing of the budget from the city manager's side, and then sort of a real involvement at the council level. Like, you know, I could see almost like, you know, sending it to the legislative executive side and be like, it's your process. Like, here is the management staff, where we're at, organized. It is now like your responsibility to decide what you'd like to send back to me and say, this is what we're going down. Like, this is the manager's request. We don't like this. We think this is too much. We think this should have been added because it's our policy priority. I would love that. I think that in terms of time could really help us. Like, we're gonna get you the most perfect budget we can at a manager's recommendation at the department level. And then it's this council's purview to flag that budget for what they think is best.
And, if I may, I don't think, especially myself, I have been pretty quiet during the budget process because I didn't want to drag it out any longer than it had to be. And I'm the one guy looking in a different direction. But I don't think as a council, me included, I'm the worst. We have fed department heads a good, clear objective when they left here.
Yeah.
And I think I'm the worst one. I don't think that we, as a group, have sent them off with a clear direction.
Yeah, you saw it with Mike last night. Like, I kind of understand because I'm so close to it. And I think the finance team and Sarah, we're so close to that SIP. You know, you all, where we're at, but Mike, you know, am I getting the excavator or not? When is the excavator coming? I need to plan for that. You know, so I think a lot of that falls on me in giving better direction. But I think as we switch towards strategy conversations, you know, this is a big part of it. How do we give better direction to staff? How do we create those touch points for, here's the data we want to see? I often feel like when we come to a council meeting, it's like, all right, there's an idea, we got to forward. I'm sort of the one who filters it, or the department heads on what they want to get forward. And then we come to the council meeting with our best guess of what you're going to want to have questions on or go through. And, you know, and you guys have to say yes or no right there. And so you're trying to kind of make the sausage in real time, and that's where I feel like some of the frustration comes from on, again, to others, I think Bangor has a similar system of breaking things out into multiple units. So like by the time it gets to the council, you've had basically a oversight committee to move it forward with a yes or no recommendation, similar to, and then it's, you know, there might be some things on the edges, but you're not really using those council meetings for super in the weeds. That's what takes the time.
That's a really good point. I don't know if that's where you were headed, but legislative committees, they go into the weeds on a bill, they do the work, and then they make a recommendation to the House and Senate. And it either goes or doesn't, there's more debate, but it certainly streamlines rather than all 186 people hearing 2,400 bills.
Right.
Which is kind of where we're sitting. So, no, this is a good conversation. I can't wait for next season.
I also want to state too that I'm not ready to give any of the department heads direction at this point because we still are missing pieces of that budget. We're, you know, the police union numbers, there was stuff that you had highlighted on there that we were going to bring into the budget last night. I don't know what the one that we talked about in the capital improvement, or like the janitor and some other pieces that you had highlighted in yellow that hadn't been brought into the budget numbers yet. Am I correct?
There might have been a few things like, yeah, 15, 20,000
Yeah,
based on last night. So that final's there. It's really just vehicles and then a deeper conversation
Yeah,
on debt.
I'm not ready to give them clear direction until we kind of have more of that's just my personal opinion.
But what do you mean by clear direction?
So, no, they were asking last night, oh, am I gonna get the excavator? Am I gonna get this? Am I gonna, you know, are we getting the new employee? That sort of thing. So, as Steve was stating, they didn't, and Mike was asking, am I not making any sense?
I'm just trying to
It
think
is
of like how
Friday
you
morning,
see that.
It's not a green
After a
light,
long
yes.
week.
I mean, my sense is it's coming together. We're not going to do a green light until
Yeah.
we've got the numbers. So
Thank
this
you.
is where we are inclined at this time with more information coming.
Right.
Yeah.
But we're very close.
Yeah, we're very
Yeah, it
close,
does. It
but
feels good.
I don't want the department heads to feel like that we're not giving them any directions because we
Yeah.
still don't have the full picture.
Right. And the direction is when the budget's passed, and as quick as possible to know that here's where we're going to go. That's the final.
And I just want to add another, not counter to everything, but kind of in a different direction, looking at this, that the budget is worth the effort. It's not just the numbers. You know, I've worked on the state budget as a legislator. I have a nonprofit that I lead. I do that, but I'm in the midst of that budget as well, going through my board process. It's the numbers to make sure that you're sustainable. It's a moral document, the conversations we have about what we were going to give for social services and where we put our money. And we're setting policy. When, you know, you and I had an exchange about what comes first, the budget or the strategic planning. Like the budget, strategic planning is built into the budget. So it's worth the time that we're putting into it. Absolutely get better at where we focus it, and if we can do it with fewer hours and fewer meetings, that's cool. But we're setting policy, where we're saying who we are as a city while we're making sure we balance the budget. So it's worth the time and the effort and the transparency to make it a really good process that we can all be proud of. And again, that we can support when we're talking with people who live here.
I think this is a great conversation.
Thank you.
And I really do. I think it's a great conversation. And we're lucky that we're in this spot talking about how to make it better, because it went from the floor level to here
Yeah.
in 1 year, and now we're talking about what we could do from a better level.
No, exactly.
But I will state this, and I know that I'm a little bit sometimes simple, but maybe to paraphrase some of this in my words, I would like to spend more time. If this is the problem, it seems that we're circling the problem and circling the problem and talking about the problem. And I would like to spend more time talking about the solution and less time circling the problem.
It's interesting. I disagree with that whole.
Well, I didn't expect you to.
I don't think. Well, I should say I don't think we've. I think it's so important to define the problem. I think in some ways though, like we're not in alignment on what's the problem we're trying to solve. I have an idea of what that is on cost increases of. I've talked about it with Guns and Butter, and it's not exactly the most graspable pieces, but I think when you look at the budget and what we spent the most time on versus what's driving cost, and some of the, the comp plan, the business attraction plan, the housing needs assessment, 90% of what comes out of these council meetings, it's an enormous amount of task, a task environment, and it falls on some of the smaller parts of city government. And it creates like this huge burden of responding to task pressure, We need more solid waste stuff. Mike, I can't tell you the amount of stuff Mike's got on his plate right now. And we didn't increase the highway department or, his area by an initial 2 or 3 additional administrative staff to me, that's where the problem's gonna lie. And that's, hopefully next in the strategy conversation, we can talk a little bit more of, what do we wanna get, so we can get to those solutions. I think the other problem is the deferred maintenance, and we don't have the data on that yet, too. I think Sarah is gonna be working on that. It's sad, not sad, but this SIP was really pretty small, right? There's a few things in this budget, 60,000-ish, maybe less now that we can realign some of that for the TIF, but the larger conversation on the, multiple millions, tens of millions of deferred maintenance, those are gonna be much harder conversations on here's where you're at, hasn't really been done in 5 years here. So I disagree a little bit on defining the slots problem a little more until we can get to those. And then how do we prioritize that? And I'm looking for help from the council too as we go into that on how this team can maybe be, I find it frustrating to be the filter of that, to have to be like, I'm the one who decided, you guys push these things down, the management, and that's the role I took. I'm complaining, I love this job. But I feel like there's a strategy exercise, but there's also like a prioritization exercise that I need to do, and the council probably needs to engage in that will kind of be some of those tough decisions on what the solutions we want to go towards, so.
I agree with all of that, and I think when you're fully staffed here, when you've got the economic development director and the planner, then I think those things can really step forward. Having Sarah here is going to make a tremendous difference in, I keep describing, it's the reason that we all run for this position is to be able to make a difference in how the community grows, and to your point about making it a livable, enjoyable place where it's great to do business. We can have all of it, it takes a lot of work.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to the next sort of execution, like these, one mentor of mine said, all kinds of strategy ideas. Now, this was in the campaign days, so which are, in terms of purpose and the problem, the problem is getting votes. Like, it's extraordinarily clear, simple,
And finite to a certain date.
Finite, and he was to say all strategies about resource deployment, yes, you have time and human resources. The most important resources are your financial ones. That's really your only strategy document, is how you're spending your money, and these massive spreadsheets, and how we're kind of going towards this piece. Government's different, and it's in terms of your levels of abstraction, like in campaigns, it's getting votes. In city government, and if you work in labor and workforce development, it's helping the labor and workforce, like that's your focus. At a city government level, we have so many different entities.
Do all the things.
Yeah. So what's your purpose? Adding public value? I don't know. People don't. Fiscal responsibility. But these are like kind of it's interesting problem, like what our mission is. How do we align strategy around that? So really interested in that.
Maybe just to kind of, what I see is, it's been a really great process. Steve, I agree with you. I like to just like jump into, let's solve this thing, right? But the process is part of it. but seeing where we were and seeing where we are now, and the fact that we're targeting and coming in at what looks like to be a SIP or a CPI-based budget, it's a huge accomplishment.
Yeah, it really is.
So this last year, this council has been, Charlie's leadership and all the staff, it's been really remarkable. So I'm very excited where we're at, and yeah, we're talking about some details here, but this is a good position to be in. So I'm just, it's been hard work, it's clear, finance team, everyone's been kicking butt. And so I'm excited to get this budget passed, and then to really start having these important conversations about strategy and process. And, we have a deputy city manager now that's gonna continue to amplify our abilities to do that. So it's really exciting. It'll be a good summer.
And acting city manager one next week, so.
Oh, there we go.
Good luck. And to your point, Pat, I'm so excited for this team, for this process. We got, I think I can be, I always want to iterate. I always want to push, get a little bit more. Employ Agile Scrum. Let's work faster. Let's get more productive. But then you got to take a step back too and be able to, I really feel like we're in that level of going from operations and personnel to policy and execution.
Right.
And super excited about the SIP, capital, the ordinance changes, which I think, and potentially some process changes there. I think, Patrick, we're talking strategy too about maybe some structural reform that we can get better on prioritization and how things move through the council and get back. The TIF reimagining, I think the work that Tammy and Michelle did, having read those 3 documents again, it was just so fascinating to see your all's input and where you were at as an organization there to even be making those decisions. It's really set us up well to kind of reimagine those. But we got a lot of work to do, especially to gather your institutional knowledge for next 6 months. I don't think anybody's saying anything official, but you do day countdowns, so I'm assuming there's not running for early.
I've actually lost count. I don't know where I'm at right now.
Hey, even better sign.
Because you're reconsidering, you're having so much fun.
No, my husband will divorce me, I think. I'm kidding.
I should also note one of the things I'm excited is just like the doing. The Harbor Park, the 1.6, like the stuff we already, it's going to start activating. We've got some beautification for flowers on Main Street with some bad vendors last year that we got all that stuff. We're now in a different mode. Even the windows here, right? When I first got the call in to come into interview, I come to Ellsworth all the time, so I just snuck into the building during office open hours and just kind of wandered around, like, what's this place like? And every time, and I came by and I just saw like shattered windows right next to the staircase over here. And so I came in December, I was like, oh, interesting. Like, I wonder what's going on there. And there was like plastic over the window. And then I came back for interviews in January, and that shattered glass was still there. And there was plastic over that kind of, I was like, this place is, even everybody walking by here, hundreds of people just seeing glass shattered on a basement window in the middle of winter. I wouldn't have it in my house, I wouldn't like it, but you'd have to take care of that. And I was like, wow, there must be a lot of deferred maintenance here. And now we're getting those windows were already in storage. We couldn't get but now they're here, they're getting installed, things are getting paved, things are getting done. I'm just like, this team is killing it, so.
Anybody have anything else? No? Look at me, look at you. Public stuff. I do want to let everyone know that we have implemented the 3-minute speaking time limit. So if there's anybody from the public that would like to speak. Anybody? Okay.
Good morning, Jared Wilbur, resident. First, I'd like to start off by saying that this year, you guys are correct, it has been like, I almost enjoy watching finance. I can't believe I'm saying that at night. And somebody sitting at the house going into the details and how we're coming up with these numbers and how we're going forward. I feel like, it does enlighten the citizens quite a bit. And, you know, there is parts where you're like, oh my gosh, we're still talking about this, let's get to the other part. But,
We feel the same
it's
way.
nice to know those numbers, because like Nancy said, all those little numbers, they do add up. And it is nice to know where they're coming from. And like last night's conversations, when you guys were talking about an intern, and all of a sudden we're talking $6,000, and then she's like, well, if we use the same thing, we can save $30 or $3,000 or someplace like that. And those are the numbers that will help lower the mill rate and help the citizens out. So, you know, you guys are doing an awesome job compared to like past, those ones were like, oh my God. But this year, you guys have done like an awesome job, and it's really good. I'd like to thank Tammy for finding the double payment. That was a huge savings across, you know, I was like, wow, in one day offset, if First National will go with that, that's huge money that, you know, we'll either lower or we can move it into something else. One thing that I haven't been able to find any information on, and maybe you can bring some light to it, is are we running, so we have the incubator down there, and I was just curious, like, is that a net loss when we run that, or is that, and if so, is that something that we can bring to at least a break-even point? I feel like you don't need to go for fair market value, but at the same time, I feel like, you know, something like that where we're providing a service at a discounted rate, at the same time, the citizens maybe shouldn't be carrying a burden of that. Because it is a really good deal for them, they're right on the water. I just, as a citizen, don't think that we should be funding extra money towards something when they're already getting a good deal, because they're definitely not going to be paying fair market value.
Yeah, we didn't have the ERKI budget in our budget books.
Yeah, it's an econ dev. I think we can.
I think we added that.
You did.
Yeah, it's
It's now
just.
been added.
We can talk about that. I think the ERKI piece.
We may need to review it too, because I don't think as a council, have we reviewed that ERKI budget? No, so that will need to come back to us as well.
Yeah, we'll come back to it. I think we're pretty similarly funded to the previous year. I'm kind of putting a lot of that stuff into the TIF, you know, so, yeah, level funded. And that's funded through the TIF already in the econ dev. But, well, you know, I think there's a major reimagining, Jared, that needs to go on with ERKI. There's high vacancy rates that have been, last couple of years, like a lot of things, I feel like things have been orphaned. There was a lot of great impetus and ideas or something, and then all of a sudden, like, it hasn't had the same enthusiasm that it started with. So, yep, there's been a lot of vacancy. You know, the previous analysis I'd done is we're losing about 25,000 a year between what we spend on it and what, like, the folks. I think there was an idea that would be focused really on kind of biotech and help some innovation pieces. That hasn't materialized at scale. It's kind of acting more as like a WeWork, but it's also a depreciating asset. Like, you know, I've been in that building a few times lately. I don't know if council has been there. Maybe
Earlier this weekend.
yeah, it's in need of some love too. So in fact, in some ways, it could be more investment we need to put there if we're gonna. And what does the council see as a policy for how we would do? We want to keep trying with the biotech side of things? Do we want to go to a total WeWork? Does Steve want to turn into a parking lot?
I want to stop pouring money into that, that's what I.
Make it our water to
If I could just, this is a great point to be having the public comment. First, thank you for thanking us. Human nature is, we're much more comfortable telling people when they're doing things we're not happy with. Very rarely do we hear that we're doing good, so I appreciate that. And the second thing is, this is the comments about ERKI is, so the Union River Center for Innovation, it's getting a revamp that we're looking at, and there's two things. There's what happens, and then there's the where should it be happening. Does that need to be waterfront next to the marina where maybe there ought to be a commercial activity in the future? That's a question about the building, but the other is about what we're doing to provide innovation for businesses. And, you know, it had been built on biotech, conversations about what a better future, a more relevant future might be. That's all stuff that hopefully we're going to pick up in the coming year. So knowing that other people are noticing both what's up with the building and what's up with what we're trying to do.
Yeah, we had a great
They're separate
conversations about food ecosystems. I
Yeah.
really feel like that could be an amazing use of that facility to, you know, and again, not to have it where we fund it and keep it together, but like give it to a nonprofit and that's your piece on that side. Or maybe sell it to LL Bean so they can operate a kayak center out there. We don't have to go further. Or maybe back to biotech, or maybe.
Yeah, tremendous potential for the building, and for Erky, the entity, so that both have value for the city.
But also to your point, while yes, we have a conversation, to your point, Steve, on like, let's get it done. You know, we have a consultant that was recently brought on over there that's been really kind of reimagining his space. And kind of priority one is, yeah, we have office space with windows and a fee to be there, and they all need to be full to be subsidizing the cost of that at where it's at now. That's sort of priority one for that team that's on Erky is, yes, there could be a reimagining, but for right now, let's get all those places full. Let's minimize the expense to the taxpayer, sort of maintenance funding for now. And then let's talk as a group of what to do about Erky, maybe as a TIF conversation. That's what
Yep.
funds Erky, so.
Okay.
Great stuff, Jared, thank you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jared.
Roger Gilly, resident of Ellsworth. I mean, I agree with everything that Jared just said. You guys have done a really good job at, you know, trying to keep everybody on point and try to keep costs down. You know, like anything, there's still improvement. I guess pretty much the city of Ellsworth's a business. So I guess my question today is, you know, is anybody looking forward to how the city is actually gonna make money and help support itself, other than, you know, every year taxpayers, you know, going up? A guy lives down the road from me a few miles, you know, he pays $7,000 in taxes, like I said before already, because you can see the water from his attic. How many more times can he take an increase on his taxes before he has to sell his house and move out? You know, and then Ellsworth turns into Bar Harbor, where no locals actually live in town anymore. So with that, you know, I know a lot of people, I've talked to a lot of people, and the big thing that keeps coming up with everybody that talks to me is, you know, taxes, taxes, taxes. And then as of late, you know, just this week, the city won in a court case over $40,000 over a simple fix. Where do we cut that off and say, okay, for something that would only cost $1,000, why are we charging somebody over $40,000 in a case? I really think that we need to sit back and think, you know, without citizens here, you know, who has a job in the city? You know, maybe we let in some of these bigger businesses instead of telling them, you know, you guys can't come here, like, you know, Texas Roadhouse or something like that. You know, they're going to absorb a lot of the tax burden if something like that comes in. You know, when do we let something like that happen, you know, to justify the taxpayers' money? You know, and as I watch all these meetings, we keep on, you know, talking about other towns. You know, Sanford is one of them, you know, and trying to compare it to Ellsworth. They're totally different. People in Sanford aren't far from Portland. A lot of money down there. We're in a whole different tax bracket. We're in a different tax bracket than Bangor. I drove to Portland from here making $150 an hour doing carpentry work. It's big. You don't get that around here. So I really think that, you know, as a city, as a community, as a council and the manager and everybody, you know, everybody needs to come together and figure out how the city's actually gonna be able to survive and pay for itself without trying to up taxes every year.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Gilly. I think, kind of going back to Jared too, and I think you mentioned it like that there is that piece of the budget with the intern, and there's, you know, a dozen of those. Again, it wasn't a lot in the moment, but some of them were bigger. And your piece, I think, is kind of the iterative process. Some of the things that I, even reviewing the TIF, it's like, all right, we can take 20,000 out, we can take this out here. Maybe I can get a little bit earlier next cycle to kind of have those to you all, so we can kind of really flag a little better into the next cycle. On your point, you know, we're close to probably an announcement on a new econ dev person soon. Their first order of business is WS, you know, Texas Roadhouse types. There's a lot of, I've had a couple of conversations with those developer there on why, like, those types of businesses can't go there. It's been a long time since that development's happened, and we're not seeing that there. So think that's kind of a first order of business. That could be some huge tax growth for the city of what's going on up there.
Did we lose out on the Texas Roadhouse?
I know.
I love.
You know, from what
Texas
I-
Roadhouse.
You know, with
Texas
that,
I think we would welcome them. I'm not sure
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's just for them to
bring 'em
come
on
here.
in.
It has to have a certain traffic count.
you know, I don't want to speak too much about private conversations I've had with, but I would say generally, the issue is we're competing against, you know, for Texas Roadhouse, for Olive Gardens, for those bigger chain type pieces, which could go in there fairly easily, and I think would be wildly
perfect,
profitable.
yeah.
A Chick-fil-A would have a line, you know, 3 miles long in the summertime. It would be wild. You could have a. So why? So what's going on? Is the price point that WS is charging for these things, you know, for their lease structure? Is it our competitive environment that for Chick-fil-A or for Olive Garden, Texas is building hundreds of thousands of houses a year to buy $300,000 house. Suburbs are growing in population, and so we're competing at little old Ellsworth, 8,700 residents, of course, the census, compared to a new suburb of Dallas that has 45, 50,000 people. And like, if you're a bigger chain, that's your kind of, you know, these, from what I've been told, they have these national kind of aces, that's how they, and then the construction costs in Texas versus up here. So you're gonna build a facility, there's gonna be this amount of cost to it, to build it up, and 8,700 people may, can we acquire that type of national chain piece that's been talked about? How many of those do we have here? Is there a different type of thing should we offer credit enhancement agreements to residential, mixed use residential and retail? How do we really tackle that? That's not just hoping that the Texas Roadhouse will come here. Maybe we can get it. Maybe I need to call Texas Roadhouse.
I do hope they come. And Chick-fil-A.
What's up?
Push down the cost of entry, get rid of these impact fees, lower the cost of entry, and all of this problem. I don't know if it's a problem. It will get easier. Lower the cost of entry.
Totally agree. I think ordinance,
Yeah, we need to definitely look at that.
and I know we have a little disagreement on what is that cost that's driving that, and I want to get into that. We've talked more on in the impact fees. And I'd also say, like as we saw last cycle with Larry, our last meeting, like, new growth we're going to get you those numbers, but new growth, well, we could do more. We're getting that. Ellsworth is in a very unique. We've seen a lot of new growth compared to the other cities in town. This, you know, Castine, we're not seeing it. We see our property taxes, our property valuations grow. That's what's driving the growth in Castine, but it's not driving the cost of city government or town government. Castine is not being subsidized by new growth that's coming in. It's just our tax increases. So we're getting a pretty decent amount in Ellsworth. How do we monitor that? How do we track that better? How do we encourage that? That's the secret sauce. You know, the TIF, I feel like, could be a big tool with that piece, with credit enhancement, ordinance reviews, changes, process changes. Pretty, I think, exciting momentum building time here in Ellsworth, so.
Does anybody here know anything about this $40,000 thing?
I apologize, I've got a 9
Yeah,
o'clock
I-
up
I'm sorry,
there too.
I can talk to you, Steve, about
I'm sorry?
the $40,000 thing.
Yeah. You don't know about it either?
What's the $40,000 thing?
Well, he mentioned
I think
something.
it's the lawsuit, some lawsuit.
Court case?
Oh, yeah,
Court
you know,
case.
I'm hesitant to talk about lawsuits with the city, but let me get back to you on information on that. I'm not aware of the detail of that piece, but I can look into it more.
Okay,
Great,
great.
thank you all.
Thanks for coming.
Wow, I thought that was gonna be like a 5-minute meeting, but it turned into a nice policy
That was a
conversation.
good conversation.
Bye, Nate.
Is there anything?
All right, see ya.
See you now.
Yeah.
Do you know something about this? I know nothing about it.
No, I'll look into it more, but again, I don't, do you have any more information, Mr. Gilly, on this $40,000?
Oh, yeah, I got all kinds. The guy that was getting sued by the city got a letter dropped off by the sheriff's department yesterday, says that he owes the city $47,000 in 30 days. And it was a case that went to court earlier this week over some trash on the Happy Town Road.
Oh, it's a notice of, it's a code enforcement notice of violation.
Okay, so it's not a,
Many, many years.
So it's.
Okay, so we do know
it's in
something about it.
process.
Okay.
we can get you some
So-
information on the public side of it.
So my question about it was really is, you know, something that can be taken care of easily. The guy just got back to work because he's been hurt, but needless to say, no matter what, it's gross, it's disgusting, it needs to be fixed, but that's, you know, why are we taking people's homes, basically? I mean, how is he gonna afford to pay $47,000 or what is the cost? Because I'd be willing to help the guy out. I offered him some of my equipment and my dump trailer to take care of some of his issue. But, you know, where do we draw a line? Because this is getting wild.
Sarah, maybe you could share with me privately.
Yeah, I hesitate to
What's
talk about
going
lawsuits
on,
and those
yeah.
other smaller pieces. Some of it might be public information, happy to provide to you, Steve, but I don't like to, you know.
Right.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
also don't like to have misinformation out there. I've seen a lot of that.
Right, that's why I'm
Come
asking.
around on numbers, and even right here, there seems to be two different numbers we're talking about, and especially, there is some aspect of this that's public information, but.
Yeah, I'd like to learn that. Let's go in your office.
Well, the only
tomorrow.
reason why I mentioned it is because he's already been served his fine, so it must be public by now.